I'm Doug Kaufman, co-pastor of Benton Mennonite Church in Goshen, Indiana, and director of Pastoral Ecology at the Center for Sustainable Climate Solutions. I first started to care about ecological issues when I started baptizing people in the Elkhart River, which is the river just across the street from my church. And sometimes the river is too poopy for safe bodily contact. And so we got involved in monitoring the health of the river, and I started to read the Bible differently, realizing how important rivers are, but just how important all of creation is in God's eyes. And so that's why I care. And so in this first session, we're going to explore some of the complicated emotions around especially climate change, why people don't engage as much, and hopefully to also start proposing some ways to help us to care more about the climate. For many years, climate scientists thought if only people had more information about what is happening, they would do something about it. This has not proved true. In some cases, knowing more about climate change causes people to do less about it. This is called the psychological paradox of climate change, coined by psychologist Perez Stokes. Over the past decades, as North Americans and Europeans become more informed about the changing climate, we care about it less. This finally shifted in the past several years, but it's still a worrisome trend. Information isn't enough. We need to care. And as a pastor who cares deeply about climate change, I ask, why don't people care more? And how can I, in worship and preaching and education, shape people to care about the whole world that God has created? Part of the problem is when we keep it at a distance. As a white, middle-class, middle-aged male Midwesterner, I'm more insulated from the effects of climate change than a poor young woman in Zambia or a young Latino on the Gulf Coast. In my rural community, there's a lot of denial about the climate. And this literal denial is supported by the fossil fuel industry. This hard denial is less common than many people think, but it is real and it is powerful. But as the changing climate becomes harder to deny, another denial has become more prominent: interpretive denial. Yes, the climate is changing, it says, but not because of fossil fuel emissions. It has to do with how the earth wobbles or some other sciencey sounding interpretation. But I believe that the most pervasive denial is even trickier to confront, a soft denial that I find in myself. And this is implicatory denial. We deny the psychological, political, and moral implications of the changing climate. The facts aren't denied, and they're not given an odd interpretation. We acknowledge what is happening, but we don't integrate it into our lives, nor do we become politically active. Because this is my own experience and that of many of my peers, this is what I have focused on. But in recent years, as I talk to more people about our emotional life around climate, I've discovered two other primary ways people engage or disengage climate. I've heard more climate anxiety as I talk to young people. And after all, they will live with the consequences of older generations' neglect of this important issue. As they consider both how their lives have been built on greenhouse gas emissions and how their future will be devastated by natural disasters and social disruption, it is easy to feel anxious. And finally, I find climate anger among many people as well, but it seems to be more prominent among some young people and among frontline communities, often people in poverty and people of color. These are the people who are already experiencing the devastation of climate fuel disasters. This helps explain why in survey after survey, Latinos and African Americans take climate more seriously than whites in the U.S. And anger can be productive, causing people to engage in productive social change that's needed to address climate change. So later in this session, we explore more specific emotions that keep us from engaging climate and those emotions that help us engage climate.